Palestinians. At its core, the occupation is depriving Palestinians of their inherent human dignity. The UN position on this issue is thoroughly documented in countless resolutions and reports. This includes serious, long-standing concerns regarding the human rights and humanitarian aspects of the situation.
William Lawrence, who's a professor of political science and international affairs at the American University. William, your analysis on this has been so on point. You mentioned the other day to my colleague Maria that the United States has largely been focused on Iran, Russia, China. These are sort of the pillars of its foreign policy, but it hasn't focused on the Israeli-Palestinian issue. What is likely, I guess, given that fact, when we look at how the administration may have to carve out policy as a result of this, what could be some of the long-term solutions that the United States will have to come up with when we see this continued pressure from the Assembly?
Well, it's even worse than that. The U.S. was focused more not just on Iran in the region, but on Yemen, on Iraq, on Syria, on the Eastern Med issues, and even Libya, more than they were in Israel-Palestine. 13 days ago, the White House was completely caught blindsided by what was going on. And they had been dealing through Yemen and some other things with the leftovers of the Abraham Accords and the deals that were made by the Trump administration, but this was a very low priority. And what happened in Israel and Palestine has catapulted this to the top of the U.S. foreign policy agenda and given Biden his first foreign policy crisis. In the early days, he had sort of a failing grade, and in the last 3-4 days, we've begun to see movement in the right direction for many reasons we can go through. But one of the primary ones is he started to lose not only the progressive wing of his party, but the center of the Democratic Party, coming out increasingly in line with what's being said at the UN and critical of the Biden administration falling back on the old talking points. I think going forward, the main issue is not what the U.S. wants, because the U.S. really can't impose its will, certainly not for the long term, just by dictating what's going to come out of this. But the U.S. Is really trying to figure out what it can get from Netanyahu. And that is quite limited. It thinks it can get a ceasefire, and it was trying to get one by today or tomorrow. Maybe it'll take a few more days. But what it's trying to avoid is a situation like Gaza 2014, where it took 7 weeks and the carnage was, although horrific now, much more horrific in 2014. And we want to stop that from happening. Then we're talking about a truce. And what are the elements of the truce? What are the agreements made? What does that mean in terms of the blockade, in terms of expulsions and home demolitions in the occupied territories? And the most interesting aspect of this is that all of U.S. assistance to Israel is coming under review in Congress. And there was a last-ditch attempt to try to block the latest missile sale. And there's talk about preventing any sort of U.S. assistance, not only that would lead to bombing of Gaza, but that would lead to, as I said, home evictions and home demolitions and any settlement activity. And this is sort of unprecedented in U.S. politics. It's important that what's going on today involved 2 deputy prime ministers and 10 foreign ministers. It's in New York, the biggest Jewish diaspora outside of Israel, and it's being heard. It's not being broadcast live on U.S. television, but it is being heard in the United States in news reports, and even the news reports have started to move, as your editor said, in the direction of a more sympathetic to Palestinian position, and a lot of that comes from this international pressure.
Absolutely. You bring up so many great points there. It was interesting to hear Volkan Bozkır talk about how the fact that when you think about it, this has been one of the longest standing issues that has been taken up during the General Assembly. It's as old as the United Nations itself. I mean, that's a huge statement. And he said that's not just because there's been a political impasse, but there's been just a total lack of progress on negotiations. Why do you think that this hasn't been a priority for the U.S. administration? And when you talk about the pressure from progressives within the Democratic Party, is that likely to change?
So it hasn't been a priority for the U.S. administration because they didn't think they could get anything from Netanyahu. Many U.S. presidents have tried and failed at the beginning of their administrations or their end of their administrations to force peace deals. The Abraham Accords was the Trump administration version of that, a sort of Palestinian peace deal without Palestinians, which was in many ways causing this current issue. But in terms of the progressives, that has been growing since 2014. And we have this new alliance that came out of the protests around 2014, activity on U.S. college campuses, which have pitted Jewish Americans against Jewish Americans who are increasingly divided 50-50 over this issue of the occupation, and the increasing power of the Arab lobby, the Muslim lobby. We saw those big protests in Detroit, which is one of the biggest Arab and Muslim diasporas, and the confrontation between Palestinian American Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib and Vice President Biden, who then said glowing words about her in his speech in Detroit. So all of this is progressives forcing the centrists. But in the end, it's the loss of the centrists, which is really pushing Biden the hardest, because he's losing Schumer, he's losing Menendez, he's losing a Jewish congressman like Ossoff, who penned the letter that 28 senators, the majority of the Democrats in the Senate, calling for the ceasefire before Biden had even agreed that he'd call for a ceasefire. And even till today, the U.S. representative at the UN is saying the U.S. is not actually permitting the issuing of a statement calling for a ceasefire, even though that's what the president is saying. So this pressure is increasing, will continue to increase. And while it won't necessarily solve the short-term or medium-term issues for Palestinians on the ground, over time, this bodes well for an eventual reconsideration of U.S. positions, which has been building, as I said, since 2014, and the Biden administration will have to privilege this going forward.
William Lawrence, we really appreciate your analysis.